there a scientific explanation for the effect of prayer?
For the
effect of prayer when we pray, a scientific explanation for it.
What do you mean by scientific? What is science?
I suppose, well, the reason I asked the question is the way that...
I'm not bothered about why you asked the question. I'm asking you the true meaning of word science and scientific. What does it mean? Whatever is based on solid evidence is scientific. It's not only physics and chemistry which are sciences. The basic interpretation of science from old times has always been this, that philosophy and science are divided into different parts. Philosophers base their beliefs on conjectures, on possibilities. But the scientists base their beliefs on what they observe. Now their observation may be in clash with their observation in some other fields. So they continue to try to solve the problem of this contradiction until they reach a stage when the contradiction is solved by their progress in their knowledge. But they do not deny what they observe. It may be against the law of nature as understood by them at a given point in time. But if they observe a thing, they admit, this is true, this is exactly what we observe. So this is how you find the history of science throughout ages. So now coming to this question, if there is a incontrovertible evidence in favor of the acceptance of prayer, then it would be unscientific to reject that evidence. I spoke during my last Urdu class on this very subject, and I quoted many examples where no scientific explanation can be given to contradict the evidence in favor of the acceptance of prayer. So this can be found everywhere, in every home, in every Ahmadi home in which Ahmadiyat is found truly and genuinely. Thousands upon thousands of examples can be quoted. But during that Urdu class, I quoted the example of what happened in the bomb blast in Nairobi. Hundreds of people were killed and thousands were injured, except for two, both for Ahmadis. Both should have been there at that time. But Allah contrived to save them. And this could not be said of any other person. In one case, the name of the person is Dawood. He was given time to meet an officer in the embassy, in that building somewhere, of 11 o'clock. That was the time of the bomb blast. But suddenly, out of no reason, he was telephoned by the officer that do not come at 10:30, come at 11 o'clock. So he said yes. By the time the clock struck 11, the devastation had already taken place. So there was no question of his being there. The second was a case of an African Ahmadi who owns an office in that building permanently. So that morning, suddenly he fell ill, without any signs of illness during the previous night. He became so ill that it was impossible for him to go to his office. And these were the two exceptions from among the people who were saved. Now this is just one case. We can go on quoting case after case after case in which no sensible man, regarding which no sensible man can deny the influence of prayer and the influence of God. I quoted before them one very interesting example of Hazrat Mir Muhammad Ismail Sahib Razillah Ta'ala anhu. Hazrat Mir Muhammad Ismail Sahib was the eldest son of Hazrat Mir Nasir Nawab Sahib. He was a brother of Hazrat Amma Jan, Nusrat Jahan Begum. All his life he had been totally dedicated to the prayers and the institution of prayers. He quoted many of his personal experiences for the benefit of the readers of Al-Fazl. I do not quote all his experiences, but just one, which is very interesting. He was expected to go visit another city, and he forgot to book his seat. And the distance was so large, and the season was winter, that he could not tolerate the thought of standing throughout his journey while the compartments were extremely cold during that season. So he prayed to God, and he realized that his prayer was heard. So he bought a ticket without reserving a seat and went to a compartment. In those days it was not against the rules of railways to permit anyone to stand in a compartment where all seats were reserved. So that is how he took his ticket and entered the compartment, and in his own words, all seats were occupied with bedding spread out. There was no room whatsoever. So he said, so we waited for Allah's grace, standing by the door. And he addresses himself as we in that. So we waited for Allah's grace by the door, standing by the door, and knew it had to come. His belief was not shaken at all. So we waited and waited until a few minutes were left for the train to depart. And he said, I knew it's impossible that when I have a feeling that Allah has heard me, that I will be disappointed in that. So suddenly, just before the departure of the train, a man rushed into the same compartment and dragged a person away from his bed and told him to hurriedly pack his bedding, because he said, I have some very important work for which your presence here is essential. So he protested, but he dragged him out of the cabin, and as both of them left, Hazrat Mir Sahib took his bedding and put it on the same place. Now these things are not just stray things appearing occasionally by chance. In the history of Ahmadiyyat, you read them so much, so many times, that for a truly scientific person it is impossible to attribute chance to these factors. Right? Thank you.